From Cali to Tally, it's time to wake up. WarChant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source, and this is Wake Up War Chant. Now here's WarChant.com's Aslan Hudjavandi and Corey Clark.
Back in the days when I was young, I'm not a kid anymore. But some days I sit and wish I was a kid again. Back in the
Wake up!
days when I
What up, everybody? Let's rock and roll. Let's do the show. I'm Aslan. Corey is also joining us as usual, the better part of the program, the insights, the quips of one Corey S. Clark. Don't forget, folks, we'll probably keep doing Renegade Expresses throughout this whole quiet sort of season, just for the next few weeks until we get past the holy day. We'll keep rocking and rolling with all that sort of stuff. So leave your questions over on warchant.com. If you're not a member, use the promo code WARCHANT30 to get involved, or give us a call at 850-792-5730. Corey, when people call in, should we have them identify themselves, obviously, where they're from, and then have them provide us with the most notorious or famous person from their hometown?
I like that because I don't want to have to look it up on the spot. And you want to know where people are from and what they're known for. You know what I mean? I think that's a nice little touch for phone callers to get a little more. We get to know people more and where they're from, what they grew up hearing about. So, yeah, I think it should be up to you, or we're not going to play your call. Okay. Yeah, unless, if you're from Miami or L.A., we get it. Right. But if you're from kind of a small town or a sort of small town, even if you're from Tallahassee, you better tell us that T-Pain's from Tallahassee, or we're not going to play your call.
No doubt, no doubt. Hey, man, there's so much I wanted to talk about. I went and covered the SEC championship game, and there's a million things just flying and rattling through this pea-sized brain of mine on the way back, and I'm like, I just want to just go through all these sort of things, but I've had time to kind of relax and probably not do a deep dive in the entire world of what's going on in college football. Where were you 4 years ago, Corey, when the final first ever college football playoff field was announced? I feel like that's such a watershed moment in the history of the sport. And for Florida State fans, we were on pins and needles. Were we going to make it in? Did we have enough game control? But I don't recall where I was. I don't even remember. I just remember we made it, obviously, and then we had to travel all the way to flipping Pasadena. But I don't remember where I was, and I'm kind of disappointed in myself.
I was actually driving back from Charlotte, North Carolina, because back in those days, Aslan, the Florida State football program played for the ACC championship. So I was actually coming back from Charlotte that Sunday, having watched Florida State vanquish the Yellow Jackets from Georgia Tech in a barn burner, and heard it on the I guess I was listening to it on the radio, and I was really, really hoping that Florida State would stay at 4. Which is crazy. It's just nuts, even now, 4 years later, to think about them being the 4 seed behind 3 one-loss teams. But anyway, they were the 4 seed, and I was just hoping that they would stay at 4, but no, they got bumped up to 3, so they had to go to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. Is Georgia?
But that's where I was.
Is Georgia one of the best 4 teams in the nation, Corey?
Yeah, I think so. But again, and people know me. I wasn't heartbroken on Saturday because my whole, me being a pragmatist and a realist and growing up a lifelong Atlanta sports fan, even if Georgia gets into the playoff, what are they going to beat Clemson and Alabama back to back? So they would have had to beat Alabama, then probably Clemson, and then Alabama again. Awesome. Good luck. That wasn't going to happen. And yeah, I guess, man, but I don't know. Would Oklahoma have lost to LSU by 20?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't think they would have. I really don't. I think Georgia plays Alabama better than anyone else can, but I don't necessarily think that means they're the best team. I think they just for some reason they match up pretty well with Alabama. Certainly not well enough to hold a lead. Can't do that. Wouldn't want to do that, Kirby. But I just they didn't match up well with LSU, and and they didn't beat anybody great either. They get credit, I guess, for beating the snot out of Florida and Kentucky, but we know what those teams are. And yeah, they had. My point is that they had a chance. They had their chance. You win, you're in. You have a 2-touchdown lead. The Heisman Trophy frontrunner is playing like garbage because he's hurt. They have to bring in the backup who's not very good, and you let him march right down the field 3 straight times. That's on you, man. You had a chance to get into the playoff. All you had to do was win the game, and they didn't.
Yeah. Hey, I got a stat for you here.
All right, let's hear it.
290 total plays between Alabama and Georgia in the last two games they played in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, one being the national title game, the other being the SEC championship. Of those 290 plays, Alabama led for 9 of them.
Yeah, 2-0.
And they won both.
2-0.
And they won both.
Yep.
I want to get to this part of the show and talk about the story that you had over the weekend, but watching the SEC championship game, and you talked about, heartbroken. That was the lasting text message in our group text with my brother and his friends, is just how far away Florida State is from that. It's so far away. It's sobering. It's sobering.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. And again, we don't even have to have the Jimbo Willie discussion. They're both at fault. That's fine. But it is pretty remarkable that, 4 years ago isn't that long ago. And I was thinking about it, even 2015, if they'd have had a quarterback, that 2015 team would have been okay. They had Dalvin, they had Derwin, they had Jalen, they had DeMarcus. You had players. To go from that, like in 2016 or 2015, like I said, Jalen, Dalvin, Derwin. 2016, it would have been Dalvin, Derwin, DeMarcus, and Deion. They had players. And now you look at what they are, and they are legitimately like, I don't even know what you'd call them. They're like Vanderbilt. They're like Tennessee. It's all up front. It's not all up front. Most of it's up front. You watch Georgia and you watch Alabama, and those dudes push people out of the way. Even those defensive lines were getting pushed around, and they were getting protection. Now, I will say this. The SEC lets them play, meaning the SEC lets them hold. And that's on both teams. Both teams were holding the whole game, and they're just not going to call it, which that's fine. But it's almost unfathomable where they were in 2013, 2014, even starting 2015, 6-0. In the way they were recruiting to look like they looked the last 2 years. It doesn't make sense. It looks like a different sport.
It's incredible, man. To that point, though, what I noticed, though, is teams that were calling plays that involve quick throws, quick decisions, plays where the pocket rolled out. They were doing things to try to combat, obviously, the pass rush. Now, the offensive line from Georgia and Alabama, obviously head and shoulders superior to what Florida State has. Just how far superior are they, Corey? What did your story find out over the weekend, just in terms of Florida State and Pro Football Focus and the way they graded out this past year?
Yeah, so I looked it up for the people that aren't subscribing to War Chant, and if you're not, I legitimately don't know what you're doing. And Christmas is coming up, isn't it, Aslan?
It is. The holy day.
Wouldn't that be a perfect gift? Wouldn't that be a perfect gift for your loved one?
So easy. Don't even have to leave the house. Don't have to leave the couch. Nothing. Piece of cake.
And if you like the way I talk, if you enjoy the way we talk and banter, you should see me on a message board.
Ooh, yeah.
Anyway, so the story was I basically went and I graded. I didn't grade out. I looked at the Pro Football Focus grades for the 12 worst offensive lines. Well, the 12 worst offenses in the country. Power 5 offenses. So you're talking anybody. There were 12 teams that were 100th or worse in the country in total offense. And I looked at all their offensive lines. And we're talking Kansas, Rutgers, Kansas State, Michigan State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Northwestern, and a few others. Florida State's overall grade for guys that played 20% of their snaps was 52.3 out of 100 scale. The next closest was Kansas at 55.6 or something. Rutgers was at 63. Kentucky was at 70. Georgia's at 77. Alabama, I believe, is like at 75.5. Georgia, I think, is the top one in the nation at 77. So it might sound like 52 and 55 are close. They're really not that close. And it's just, and I said it in the story, you can make a legitimate argument that not one single offensive lineman on Florida State's team could have started at Rutgers. And Rutgers it doesn't even look like they play football, as bad as their offense is. It looks like they don't practice. And your guys were so bad that they would have had a hard time starting at Rutgers. And that's where, I really do think so, man. I don't know where other people come down on it, but with a Willie Taggart coach team, you better have a good offense. He builds his career on offense, fast-paced offenses, high scoring, lots of rushing yards, lots of points. And, man, they can't do it. They can't do it. They have legitimately the worst offensive line in the country, and it's not close. And until they get that squared away, what's the ceiling? And I think that was my overriding point in my column that I was trying to make is, look, man, they blew a game at Miami. I think if they play better against Virginia Tech, maybe they win that. But the ceiling for this team with that offensive line was 7-5, right? I mean, I don't think you feel like they got cheated out of any wins, really. And the problem with Florida, the problem with that is ceiling and 7-5 should never be in the same sentence with Florida State. And until they get the offensive line figured out, that's what it's going to be. They're horrid. They're awful. Everything comes back to how bad that offensive line was. Everything. And I know that's a dead horse, and we've beaten it. We've killed it. We've stuffed it. We put it in our living room. Can you do that, by the way? Can you stuff horses?
I'm sure you can. Probably just takes more than the average deer.
I guess you stuff everything, right? But couldn't you just stuff if you had a pony that died, couldn't you just stuff her and put her in the living room and you could still sit on their back and stuff?
I guess.
I mean, I'm just, hey, it's Christmas season. I'm throwing out some Christmas gift ideas, kids. If you know someone with a pony. So yeah, man, that was startling to me. I know we've known it's bad. I know that we know the grades about, there's 837 linemen in the country that have played 20% of the snaps. Florida State has like number 837, 836, 832, but it's impossibly bad. And we look at, everything else being equal, and it's not. Obviously, Georgia and Alabama are better coached, and they have better defenses. But those offensive lines are it's like they're not playing the same sport again. It's impossible to be that bad. And if they don't fix it, and again, you got to figure out a way to do it, man. You can't grade out at a 52.3 and play competitive college football and beat good teams. You just can't do it. You can't. I mean, Kentucky was Kentucky, and they graded out at a 70. So, that's how bad Northwestern was like a 68. Northwestern. So until they get that figured out, and I don't know if it's through recruiting, if it's better coaching, it's a combination of both, because certainly these guys weren't coached well. And just because they're not great players doesn't mean you have to coach them to where they're the worst unit in the country. And that's what they were this season. So until that gets figured out, man, you're looking at more of the same.
It just
goes. Don't you think it all comes back to that? Like at the end of the day, if Willie Taggart had his normal offense, just what he had the last 3 years before he got to Florida State, which was average, top 10 in the country in rushing. So you're looking at 250 rushing yards per game instead of 80 or 72, whatever they average. So that's 170 more yards per game and 13 more points per game on minimum. Don't you? I mean, that's the whole deal. You win 8 games, 9 games maybe. If he just had his normal offense instead of the worst offense he's ever coached because of the worst offensive line anyone's ever had.
I don't know. I mean, I
well, at least we got that squared away.
I just don't know. They have to take some accountability for
no,
the play calls.
It's not. Of course,
for the quarterback they chose to run out there every single week in and week out. For starting Keith Gavin in week 1, what did they see? They came here, they looked at tape, and the first thing he said he noticed was the kids weren't having fun. Did you happen to notice that the offensive line wasn't all that good last year? Did you want to look at junior colleges after you went through spring football? Things just never got solved. There's never any sort of identity, and I guess people are like, well, what do you expect their identity to be when they don't have an offensive line that can't block anything up? I don't know. I mean, you got 5 guys. I mean, surely you're not going to all 5 be blocking your tails off on every single snap, but there was plays throughout the games. I know we were doing it in a joking fashion, but we'd sit there like, hey, he's got a clean pocket on this play, and a play wouldn't be made. But to defend Taggart and the staff, there were plays to be made. There wasn't time there wasn't time in the pocket for DeAndre to make the proper read on some plays.
But I don't think that's the bigger thing. I mean, yeah, DeAndre's gotten sacked his whole life. Like it wasn't like they were blocking it up in 16 either for him or Blackman in 17. They could not run the ball at all. And Willie Taggart offense has to be able to run the ball. Literally, they rushed for 180 yards less this season than he's rushed for the last 3 seasons. 180
per game.
I mean, that's per game. That's what. No, yeah, not with the season. Per game, 180 yards less per game. So you're talking like, what is that? I don't even know what that would be. Like 2,000 yards less. I mean, that's nuts. So that's what he went into this season, or when he took this job, I'm sure he was thinking, as we all did, that offense plays, man. It played at South Florida. It played at Oregon. He'll come in here. They'll be able to run the ball because he's got really good running backs. The offensive line can't be that bad. And it turned into a train wreck. Now, again, that's not all on the recruiting. I mean, you have to coach them up. You have to find 5 guys that can play some. And then, it didn't help that they got injured. But, Minshew wasn't injured until week 8. I mean, it might have helped that Martinez had stayed on the team. But even that, what's crazy is that you think about last year's team, which was pretty much an awful offense. Well, their grade last year was like a 66. Think about how bad last year's offensive line was, where they couldn't run really. I mean, I guess Cam ran for 1,000, but Blackman got killed every game. They got dominated by some teams, and they graded out at a 66. This group graded out at a 52. If you'd have just given Willie Taggart a 66 offense, I think you look at 2 more wins. Offensive line, I mean. Yeah. 2 or 3 more wins, because you're looking at 1,000 more rushing yards. Like he didn't have great offensive lines when he was in Oregon and South Florida. They were like 71, 72, 69. They weren't great. They were just not the worst in the country. And I just think I think most of it comes back to that. The ceiling was set, like he didn't coach well. He didn't. I'm not certainly not making the argument that he coached well. And he's on. The seat's going to start getting warm. But they've got to figure out the offensive line and figure out how to make it just competent. Doesn't have to be great. Doesn't have to be Georgia, where you got 3 or 4 guys that are going to be playing in the NFL. You just got to make it competent somehow, some way. Because if you don't, it's just going to be ugly again next year. Yeah. I mean, did you think that? Did you really? I mean, I guess I should have known that they would have been the worst in the country, that they would have graded out that low.
Yeah, I mean, when you drop Jawan and Abdul and Brady Scott, and those guys were all in the 800s, when you piece that all together, nobody's going to be able to improve that average. I mean, you could throw out Walter Jones and whoever else you want. That's not going to lift up those boats.
Yeah, I mean, I think their highest graded guy was a 62, which would have been like the second lowest guy on Michigan State's offensive line, who wasn't good either. Like, it's just – we knew they were bad. I don't think we knew they were like historically bad. At least I didn't. I hadn't put all those pieces together. And quite frankly, I should have done that a few weeks ago instead of writing another offensive line story after the season. But I just happened to look at it and think about it. And it's when you watch that Georgia-Alabama game, it's stark. It's just stark. It doesn't look like they do the same things. It just doesn't. Like, Tua and Jalen, they had a lot of time on a lot of those plays. So did Fromm. By the way, Fromm just made some ridiculous throws. Like, it wasn't like he ever had a lot of guys running free. Like, his 2 touchdown throws, the one to the tight end and then the one in the corner to Ridley, good grief.
Well,
like, those Alabama guys weren't – the Alabama guys were right on their hips.
They were in phase. I think.
Yeah, they were right there, man. Sometimes guys just make throws. And don't even start me on the fake punt. I still can't believe it happened. But, what are you going to do? I tell you what, Willie Taggart, he did a lot of not smart things this year. He never did anything the whole season as dumb as that.
Well, Kirby said that they were in a weird sort of spot on the field, and somebody was open. They just didn't snap it quick enough.
I didn't see it. Does Justin Field, is he usually their up back?
No, I asked the Alabama players in the locker room after the game. I'm just like, what were you thinking? When the faker, and like, well, we knew something was up. They're like, he's never been out there. They haven't seen anything on film all year long with Justin Fields on a punt. So
right.
They knew something was up, obviously, and then with the field position they had and that sort of stuff, they knew something was up, so they just kind of were prepared. But they covered it perfectly, obviously, because there was absolutely nothing there. It's one thing to know that they're going to do something. There was a lot of times Florida State pointed out stuff on defense, and guys still ran by them. So it's one thing to be able to diagnose it. It's another thing to be able to actually execute it. So they figured it out.
Why not just have Fromm do it then? If you're going to just run an RP, I mean, that was just crazy. They were in a base defense. It wasn't like you got them coming 10 after the punter. They also, Justin Fields, it was 4th and 11. What bothered me the most about it, other than it didn't look like anybody was even open 10 yards downfield for him to throw it to. And it wasn't like he had his best receivers on the field to throw it. So you're taking away your best weapons off the field. You're taking your starting quarterback off the field and putting the entire season in the hands of a backup quarterback that you never trust to throw the ball.
True freshman backup quarterback.
On a punt formation. But also you had times earlier in that game, right at midfield, because Dingus McGee kept punting it in the end zone from midfield.
Did. Oh, God, he was terrible.
4th and 5 and 4th and 2. You could have done it then. 4th and 11, man, with 3 minutes left, and your defense is playing pretty well. Make Jalen Hurts drive 90 yards. Well, sorry, the kid's going to punt in the end zone. So 80 yards. Or go for it. Just straight up have Jake Fromm in the game and go for it. But it was just such a bad – it wasn't just the decision. It was the design. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it would have gotten a 4th and 2. But anyway, not enough about Georgia, Alabama, right? We.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, too, and people have posted about it, and we're going to, the horse is dead and stuffed, but then we're probably going to unstuff and then restuff it.
Talking about Christmas gifts again.
Yeah, there we go. Just looking at them. I mean, just looking at those guys. But I never looked at the 2013 offensive line and thought, damn, watch out. Look at Brian Stork. He's scary. I wasn't like, respect Brian Stork. Fantastic Remington Award winner, Super Bowl champion as a rookie. Fantastic football player. But I feel like no offensive lineman has ever walked around Florida State under Vic Valoria, and you were like, damn. Look at him. He's scary.
Well, and again, it's funny that you got to see that. Like, you saw what Florida State was this year, then you went to see two of the better teams in the country, and to compare and contrast, to kind of get at the heart of what's been going on with this program. Because, in the offensive line, Trey Jackson was a big dude. Cam Irving was a pretty big dude, and Matias was a big dude. But, they weren't monsters.
Yeah.
Jernigan wasn't really a monster, but you also had Jernigan, Goldman, and Mario Edwards. Now, those dudes are beasts.
Yes.
So we talked on headlines forever about that Oklahoma game in 10, where Florida State went out there, and Jimbo had said his thing about, I'm going to bring in some grown-ass men, which he did, but in 2010, they weren't there yet, or they were freshmen, and they went to Oklahoma, and they didn't look like physically they could compete with those guys. That changed, obviously. They got some of the biggest and best players in the country, and they really could compete, obviously, with the best teams in the country, and they became the best program in the country. And then 3 or 4 years later, you look what you got. There should be a book written about it. Like, what happened? Florida State, and what bothered me, I really was bothered. On Sunday when I was watching Dabo at his pizza party and the college football selection show, wearing his cowboy hat and being goofy and all that. Again, everybody knows I like Dabo. He's done a great job. But that should be Florida State. Why has Clemson figured out a code where they can be relevant and in the playoffs 4 straight years and be in the conversation 6 or 7 straight years? And Florida State was a flash in the pan. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm telling you, at 13, 14, didn't you think, okay, this is going to last for the rest of the decade as long as Jimbo's here?
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is just going to keep rolling and rolling. It's going to be like Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma. These teams that are always there, always in the conversation. Florida State was supposed to be there, and they have fallen completely off a cliff.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I mean, it's just, I don't want to get into Jimbo versus Willie thing. It's Willie's offense have always been so good. Clearly, he didn't forget how to coach and have a
right. And Jimbo didn't forget how to recruit.
Yeah, did Jimbo forget how to recruit? Did Jimbo just all of a sudden, everyone's like, he just started worrying about stars. He didn't worry about stuff anymore. It's like, come on, man.
No. I don't think that. That's what's so. I mean, Jimbo didn't recruit that way.
The guys he went after were still on everybody's board.
Yeah, but Jimbo wasn't a guy that was just like, he trusted his evaluation process, and rightly so. And he just, for whatever reason, that different kind of guys, they didn't dedicate themselves to the weight room. They didn't dedicate themselves to getting better. They didn't get good coaching, whatever the case may be. It's just really, it's pretty remarkable. It reminds me, I guess, like even the lost decade took longer.
Yeah.
99, 2000, they were the best program in the country. 2001, Bolden gets hurt before their best player gets hurt in August. They still managed to win 9 games. In 2002, same thing. The Ricks is the quarterback. I get it. 2003, they win the conference. they still gave you glimpses of being one of the top 10 or 15 programs in the country. Florida State went from best team in the country, top 10, top 20, off the side of a cliff in like record time. And now that again, you hope Willie can do it for all of our sakes. You just hope Willie can do it. But holy moly, the offensive line is an abject disaster. And you've got to get, you don't have to be one of the best in the country. You just can't be one of the 4 worst. Like, just get to middle of the pack. And I think you got a chance to win 8 or 9 games because the way this offense can gash people. But you got to get there somehow, some way. I don't care what I don't know how much steroids cost, Aslan. I haven't done that in a while. You probably do. You work out all the time. You're at the gym. You probably see dudes shooting up all the time. I don't know how much good steroids cost or good masking agents. But you got to do something, man.
I think, I laughed almost when everybody would ask us questions on Renegade Express about, what do you think about Jalen coming to Florida State, or what do you think about Kelly Bryant coming to Florida State? Because the grad transfer thing, if you're not Alabama, and you should never compare yourself to Alabama, it doesn't work, right? I mean, Jake Coker's the only guy who's a grad transfer. I know Russell Wilson, obviously to a lesser degree because he didn't win a national title, but things worked out pretty well for him at Wisconsin. But if everyone's going to operate under this thing like give Willie time, which, okay, that's fair, give Willie time. If we're going to focus everything on how bad this offensive line is, Willie's going to need a lot more than 3 years to get that fixed. So what is it?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
I think a quarterback can mask it. If he can get
true.
A good scrambling quarterback. I mean, I don't know how much of USF's success was just not having one of the 4 worst offensive lines in the nation, or if they had a quarterback who didn't know how to run well, or who wasn't physically able to, or didn't understand the concepts of RPO, then what does that offensive line grade out to when their quarterback's holding the ball too long or making the wrong read?
Yeah.
How many plays against, the first game against Virginia Tech where things were still looking good, there was a lot of optimism still going. There was, I think, a jet sweep to Trayshawn Harrison that was kept, that people think that if he would have got the ball, he's gone. The diamond formation, people think that if Cam keeps that, he's gone instead of handing off to Amir. So how many of those plays end up making this offensive line look better? There was the play against Louisville where they jumped off sides and then they went, it didn't get flagged, and then DeAndre snapped the ball regardless, and he had like a wide open Keith Gavin and he overthrew him. Same thing I think even happened in Syracuse. I don't know if it was in the beginning of the second half or towards the end of the second half or towards the end of the first half, where Keith Gavin was like running wide open on a busted play, and like DeAndre overshot him. Like if those plays are made, they maybe cruise and beat Louisville. Maybe they're in a dogfight with Syracuse and they can figure something out towards the end of the game. So, like, there's plays to be made. It's not like Willie's schemes are just totally ridiculous and Walt Bell doesn't know how to design anything or coach them up properly. I mean, they had opportunities. I just feel like if we're going to focus all the troubles of the offense on the offensive line and we need to be patient and let Willie fix these things, I feel like offensive line is something that's going to take some time. I mean, the O-line, was it the 2011 season where they got thrown into the fire in that Champs Bowl, like Bobby Hart and those guys? I mean, that didn't pay dividends until 13. That's obviously only 2 years, but Jimbo had a lot more equity in those 2 years than Willie's going to have. I mean, Willie's got nothing left equity-wise, I don't think, really. And I'm not calling for his job. It's hard to imagine the calls, the balance between give him time and, like, did you see the graphic that shows the longest active streaks in the nation for bowl streaks? Like, that Florida State is head and shoulders so far above everybody on the list. Virginia Tech and like Georgia, I think, is second all time. It's gone. It's over now. All that stuff's done with. That sucks. The 5 consecutive wins against Florida, it's done. Like, it's so hard to like try to stay patient. I know you have to, but I wonder if we can't compare him to, I don't think you compare him to Kirby and Nick and like they got things changed around in year 2. If we're going to use the Dabo model, it took like Dabo a good 5 years to figure it out. He had the luxury that it was 2007 where it wasn't nearly as intense as it is now. Obviously, college football, Division I, big-time football was a huge deal to win games. There's coaches are coaching for their job every single week, but guys aren't making $5, $6, $7 million average on a year. I think like if we're going to give him the patience he needs to rebuild it, I think he's going to need more time unless he gets the silver bullet in a quarterback. But you think that maybe some good strength training, maybe a good freshman that emerges from spring and maybe a JUCO guy, and then things are good enough. It doesn't need to be, like you said, a top 50 offensive line. Just don't be a bottom 5.
Right. I think that's the overall point. There are whatever. I don't know how many Power 5 teams there are in the country, 60, 61, something like that. You can't be 61. Be 40. Let's see what it looks like if you're 40th or 38th. And I do think, I say this. I know you can't really count on Dickerson because you can't ever count on Dickerson, not because he's a weak kid. He just gets hurt. But if you got Dickerson and you got Minshew and then you got who? Maybe Brady Scott's a really good center. That would help.
Josh Ball is going to they're thinking Josh Ball likely. I shouldn't say likely, but there's a possibility that Josh Ball.
Yeah, but that kid was 690 when he played. Yeah. Like he ranked 690 in the country, which would have been the best tackle that this team had by far. But you got to hope that one of the new kids can come in and play. That does happen. That happens in the SEC. Both Georgia and Alabama have had true freshmen that start on the offensive line, good ones. You got to hope the Lucas kid can come in and maybe play right away and can be good. And you just can't be an all-time worst offensive line. That I think that's maybe the overall point of that column was it just wasn't a bad offensive line. It was an all-time worst offensive line. It's impossible to have those kind of grades at a place like Florida State. So obviously you got to coach them better, somehow get through to them. They need a whole nother year in the weight room to get stronger, bigger, all that. And hopefully better with an influx of talent. Whether it's JUCO, you need bodies, you need healthy bodies, not just bodies, and you need some guys that can move people. And if you can get that to, again, you don't have to be the worst in the country, you don't have to be the best in the country, somewhere in the middle, I think you got a chance. I do. I think you got a chance to make rapid improvement.
And here's my thing.
You're not going to win a championship. But we know that. This roster has to be turned over completely before you're competing for a championship. But if you can get your offensive line just to not be awful, to just be subpar or mediocre, just to be 2017 and 2016, if you can get it to be that caliber, then you're going to win some games. And then you keep building on that. And maybe, like Jimbo, 3 or 4 years into your tenure, you get an NFL-type offensive line. That's got a lot of cohesion because they played together, they've got confidence, and they get bigger, better, and all of a sudden you got something.
I just wonder, say this team wins 8 games in 2018 or 2019. I'm sorry, 2018.
Wouldn't that be something? Going to a bowl.
If they were to win like 8 or 9 games next season, I wonder what will it be? Will we say it was because they had better quarterback play? Will it be because we said they had a better offensive line? Will it be because they had a more manageable schedule? Will it be because the defense was able to make teams? I just wonder what we're going to be talking about at the end almost of next year in terms of what's going to – there has to be improvement. It's hard to imagine they're going to take a step back next year. And if they were to take a step back, that's lights out. That's curtains for a lot of people. I wonder what it's going to be. I think, I just think it's hard to make the offensive line. The freshmen that tried to get better this year obviously weren't ready. I mean, hopefully they'll be ready. I don't know how practical of a solution that is. I just think it comes down to it's going to be a lot of the same cast of characters that you're kind of, duct tape and popsicle sticks keeping this thing afloat with. Boy, it would be fun to see another quarterback maybe, just to see what happens. Just see what happens, maybe. But
I think that's a big deal to have a running threat. We've said it all season. I get it. You're right. It can mask a bad offensive line if you have a running threat as a quarterback. Again, that's stuff, we know Willie's trying to figure it all out. Like it hurts him more than it hurts us for them to be 5-7 and him to be watching. You watch what Clemson did. That was another one, Clemson and Pitt. Like I didn't watch a ton of that game, but I watched enough of it. Clemson wasn't doing anything through the air, and it didn't matter. They feel like they ran for over 300 yards in that game. Like, even when their hotshot quarterback isn't playing all that well, they have another thing to do. Like, it doesn't all ride on his right arm. They just decided to mash another team and ran all over them. And Florida State doesn't have that ability. Florida State did have that ability. Even in the Jameis years, He threw 28 passes against Pitt in that great game. I mean, I know he completed all of them for a gazillion yards and 5 touchdowns or whatever, but they weren't like an air raid show. They had Wilder and Freeman and Carlos Williams and an NFL offensive line. That's what made that thing score 94 touchdowns. It was the offensive line. It was having greatness at quarterback. But what would Jameis have done behind these guys? Probably stuck with baseball. You know what I mean? Like, it's just and so I think when Willie in the middle of the season, when he was asked about DeAndre and kind of, got prickly about it, was because, he knows what the deal is and how hard it is to play that position when you never can trust your guys. And the whole thing is going to be really interesting, man. The whole thing's really going to be interesting. But I did think Championship Saturday was very enlightening. Oklahoma, by the way, has an incredible offensive line. Those guys are great too. I know Kyler Murray's probably going to win the Heisman, or might win the Heisman.
Does he get your vote? Who's going to get your vote, or can you not tell?
I'm not allowed to say, but okay. I will say this: I'm not allowed to say for sure. I'm not allowed to say with certainty who I voted for, but I will say this: that things that transpired on Saturday changed my vote.
Okay.
So take that what you will. Jalen Hurts is going to be your Heisman Trophy winner. But yeah, so. Oklahoma has a great – Kyler Murray gets all the headlines, and we get it. He's awesome. He's really fun to watch, and they got good receivers. But, man, that offensive line, he's back there forever with nobody near him. That's why I think they can score on Alabama. They'll lose by 30 points, but I think they can score on Alabama because that offensive line's legit, and he can move around a lot. So, it's remarkable how bad it got. It's remarkable that when they were, 5 years ago, they were the national champs. 4 years ago, they were the 29-game winning streak. Even 3 years ago, they were 6-0 and ranked 5th in the country before Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And since that point, they've lost, what have they lost? 19 games. Since that was the first of 19 losses over 3.5 years was the kick getting blocked at Georgia Tech.
Nuts. You know what's even crazier than that is thinking that they had an end of year football banquet yesterday, Corey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Golly, what? I don't even know what that was like, but
I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, what were the highlights?
What can you really say? Like, what can you celebrate? But with that said, Jaden Woodby, freshman of the year, our guy, Tamorrion Terry, offensive MVP.
Okay, I feel like that's fair, right? That's a good award for him.
And then allegedly, DeMarcus Christmas, most valuable defensive lineman.
No, come on, that's not.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Why'd you say allegedly then?
Well, I'm looking at. I was pulling it up. A user on WarChant, Evan Knowles, on the Twitter machine, was tweeting these things out. So I wanted to make sure I had. I was waiting for it to load up, but yeah, it actually shows the plaque with his name on it. Most Valuable Defensive Lineman Award, DeMarcus Christmas.
You think Burns just walked out, like Burns and Wilson, just walked out as soon as that was announced, just stood up and shook their head, or do you think they did like a Kanye? And went up to the podium. It's like, hey, man, I'm going to let you finish.
DeMarcus Christmas is my favorite fifth-year senior on the defensive line, but the most valuable defensive lineman, it was maybe Brian Burns. But, yeah, Tamorrion Terry. There we go, buddy. All right.
See, and that's the thing, right? Normally, even after a bad season like this one, a bad season, you would look at next year and go, gosh darn it, man, they got Marvin Wilson coming back. They got Tamorrion Terry coming back. Cam Akers coming back. Whatever quarterback you want coming back, Laborn's coming back, McKitty, DJ Matthews, on and on and on. Harrison, Helton, all these guys that you would feel really good about. But you don't. All the Shawns, yeah. And you don't. It should be, when you're recruiting this many guys that can play to an offense, you would think, man, they got a chance to really take a big step. Oh, man, if that offensive line is trash again, the season's going to be the same. Maybe one extra win here or there. Maybe smoke and mirror your way to 6 or 7 wins. But that's the ceiling when you can't block. And you play too many good teams to not be able to block. If they're in the Big Ten, like Michigan State, maybe they could have gotten 8 wins. But, they played a hard schedule with a bad offensive line. It was just an awful combination. And we'll stop even talking about the offensive line from here on out.
No,
we don't have to do it anymore except in the vein of recruiting. We don't have to talk about it. I mean, it really is a dead horse. I wanted to point out that it wasn't just bad. It was historically bad and the worst in the country. Worse than Kansas and Rutgers. Yeah. That should make every Florida State fan shiver that Kansas out-recruited you or out-developed you at offensive line.
Or maybe, the ACC, got to bring your A game.
That's true.
Maybe that stuff works in the Pac-12, but when you bring that to the ACC, man, it ain't going to fly. Don't matter who you put out there. It's the ACC. You got to bring your A game.
True.
I
True.
I think the schemes hopefully will be good. The one disappointing thing this weekend, and we'll try to wrap the show up here quickly or soon, is just seeing a lot of these coaches still on recruiting visits that you just hope that maybe you're going to find other jobs elsewhere, but they're still out there on recruiting visits, and it's hard to feel. It's just, I don't know, man. It's, you rattle off a whole bunch of kids that are coming back that you should feel good about, but ultimately I just wonder how all that's going to melt together and meld together. So I don't know, man. We'll see. I can't believe we waited this long to talk about it, but shout out to the women's soccer team. They're national champions. It took us 40 minutes to get to it. I apologize. It's my fault. I drive the show. I should have mentioned at the top. But again, I've just been in disarray looking at what happened to our football program. But good gosh, Mark Krikorian's got that thing rolling. Second national title in the last 4 seasons. I think Ira had a really cool tweet about the fact that it was like Florida State won it in 14, and then North Carolina, Penn State, and Stanford had won the last 3 seasons, and those are the 3 teams that Florida State beat en route to winning.
No, I think it was USC. This was crazy. So it was USC, Penn State, and Stanford were the last 3 champions. Uh-huh. Florida State knocked them all off. The one champion before Penn State was Florida State in 14, and then North Carolina was the champion in 2012, and they knocked them off. During their, I think it was, they won 6 games in the tournament. 4 of them were against national champions, and North Carolina's won 21 of them. It was remarkable.
All right.
Right? I mean, that's crazy.
No, it's fantastic. It's all. I mean, there's 2 national championship teams currently on campus. The softball team and the women's soccer team. It's awesome. It really is. The pause there was just me trying to collect my thoughts. I don't want to go down this road, but I'm going to go of all the half-baked horrible things I bring up on the show, Corey. That's something that you can feel good about, right? People and more are going to walk into work on Monday, and they're going to be like, man, look at that. Another national champion resides in Tallahassee, resides at Florida State University. Because Florida State
it's a big deal. Yeah, I mean, it's not a moneymaker, but that doesn't mean it's not a big deal. And we go back to the kind of the philosophy of the athletic department. Mark Krikorian gets paid a lot of money to be a soccer coach, relative to the money he brings in.
Yeah.
Because obviously we know he's not bringing in a ton of money. It's a non-revenue sport, but he gets paid a lot. Florida State takes care of him. I just looked at their roster. They've got 7 kids on their team from overseas. Well, Venezuela doesn't count as overseas, right? That's kind of just you could drive there though. Technically, so it's not really overseas. It's over the Gulf, I guess, maybe. Anyway, so he's got 7 foreign kids on his team. All of them are really good, by the way. But you got to recruit those kids. That's not cheap. And he's got I assume, a pretty nice recruiting budget, and he's done an incredible job at that program. It's funny, the North Carolina coach, nobody was writing about it. Tim was actually up there for covering it for Seminoles.com, and he was telling us about what the North Carolina coach was saying about Krikorian's recruiting. He goes, look, and he was talking about Stanford, how Stanford's kind of taken over and getting all the best elite kids in the country. And this is the North Carolina coach, the guy that's been there, I think, forever. He's like, look, we can't recruit against Stanford because Stanford, all they do is pitch these elite players that they can come and marry a billionaire out in Silicon Valley. They can go marry a billionaire, and then his parents will die on a yacht, and then they're going to be billionaires. We can't recruit against that. And he goes, Mark can't recruit against us, so he has to go recruit kids from all over the world. It was kind of crazy to say that. That's what Stanford does, man. They recruit. They tell you that you can come there, marry a gazillionaire because in the tech world, and then you're set up for life, and you can retire on a yacht. And we can't compete with that.
Or you can
isn't that crazy? Isn't that funny that he said that?
You can be a self-made woman and go anywhere though as well. My point again of all the half-baked ideas I've had on this, the playoff is Oklahoma, Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame. if those teams have bad football seasons, with the exception of Notre Dame is pretty much they compete in everything. I feel like it's like depression almost sets across that entire campus if that football team sucks in terms of the administration. And again, Florida State won a national title in 2013 in football, and they won one in soccer in 2014, and they competed for a national title in 2014. So it's not like there's resources being diverted to other Olympic sports or non-revenue sports that affects Florida State their preparation. And to see the way John Thrasher reacted to the basketball game last week against Purdue, that he's obviously all in with the Florida State's athletic success. Like if that's all you have is football, if that's all you have, that everybody's rowing in that one same direction, I just wonder if things are any different on those campuses. Not just dollars, but just if there's a mindset that pervades through a building when you know there's only one thing that matters and one thing alone. Not to say that Florida State doesn't place that. They know, like you've said many times, they know where the butter's being the butter's bread is butter. I can't even talk anymore. It's been
the
too
butter's
long.
Being breaded. That's the correct phrase.
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah.
I just wonder how much of that can you be all things to all programs on a campus. And I don't want to take things away from other programs to lift the football team, but I think I just said that I do kind of in a way.
Well, again, it's just what you value. If Florida State does want to be an all-school, Florida is an all-school, man. They're good at a lot of different things. They win championships in track, in softball, in baseball. Come on, Florida State, you need to catch up there. I mean, they win national championships in a lot of things too. They're good in volleyball. And I don't think I wouldn't say that negatively impacts their football program. I just think Florida State I don't want to say even takes their cue from Florida, but they want to be they want to be good in everything. They want to be in everything school when it comes to sports, and they kind of are. Right now, football's at a lull. I think, weirdly, it doesn't take the bitter taste away that much from, not going to a bowl for the first time in 100 years. But it was a nice 1 week after that disappointment to watch that team. I mean, that Stanford team had trailed for 7 minutes all season, and Florida State kind of controlled that match. And I'll be honest, I haven't watched a lot of college soccer in my life, but I watched that one on Friday night, and they're just a really well-coached team, and they're really good and really talented, and they have a couple of the best junior players in the world playing for them. And when you think about where they were, they lost to Miami, I think, the last game of the regular season at Miami, which they don't ever do. They outshot them like 25-1, but just couldn't get any in the net, and then they lost. So they're the number 9 seed in the ACC tournament. They were the 9 seed, and then they go and beat 3 top 10 teams in the ACC tournament, and then they rip off 6 straight wins in the postseason tournament. I mean, that's cool. That's something to be proud of. It doesn't make up for that season, but it at least was it was a spoonful of sugar to see that. To see if you're a Florida State fan. Obviously it's not nearly as big as Kelvin Benjamin catching in the back of the end zone. But if you're a Florida State fan, that should make you feel pretty good. Just like Jessica Warren's great catch out there in Oklahoma City. It doesn't take away. It doesn't take away from having to play in Shreveport. But that was still really cool capper to that sports calendar, to that sports year. So that's just neat. And I think I really like it for Krikorian. Like, just they've been there now for, I think that was their 10th time in the Final Four in the College Cup. And he's won 2 of them now. It's just winning that second one. Not that he needed a lot of validation, but it really does validate just how incredibly well he's run that program. And because they just keep reloading every year from all over the globe. And it doesn't. We know football drives the train. Football is the train. But for at least a day, it was really neat to see Florida State fans have something to celebrate, and that's neat. That'll never be taken away. That was a cool run. Especially, I know they won it against North Carolina in North Carolina, but the Stanford game was just really remarkable. Just they controlled that thing. They didn't back down at all. And maybe having all those like foreign-born players helps them in that regard. Like, man, they're not back. They're not shying away from Stanford or North Carolina. That doesn't matter to them.
Faceless opponent, Corey. Faceless opponent.
I'm telling you, that's what they can learn something from old Mark Krikorian, man. Willie Taggart can learn something from him. I guess all sports on campus can learn something from that guy. But as a Florida State fan, I'd imagine there's a sense of pride in what the softball team did. You have one of the best softball coaches in America. You have one of the best track coaches in America. You have one of the best soccer coaches in America, maybe the best. And not, there's women's basketball, there's golf. I mean, they're all these
volleyball.
sports. But yeah, you're always good there. They need to quit screwing around and bring home a title one of these trips. But yeah, man, again, we know the deal. We know that if football is bad, there's a bit of a cloud over everything. I think that's true even at Florida State. But at least on this weekend, a little sun broke through. Old Dana Castellanos, I know I didn't pronounce that right, to Dallas Dorsey. That was a great goal, by the way.
All right.
Did you see it?
No, I've.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, man. I got back in town late from Atlanta and, was living life. Hey, do you know the name
what's cool? Real quick. So the Jessica Warren, I've always said she's one of the best athletes to ever play at Florida State. Just an incredible hitter. And that catch she made, it's really neat that she got that moment on that stage. The same thing for Dana. She's I think she's got 1.4 million Instagram followers. Like, she's a huge international superstar. She's probably the most well-known female soccer player in Venezuela. Maybe the most well-known female athlete. I don't know. But she's a huge star in Venezuela and kind of all over the world. She's been one of the best players in Florida State history. She's just a junior. But for her to have that moment, she didn't score the goal, but she made a ridiculous pass to set up the goal. That was really cool. It's cool to see people that have been one of the best in school history to ever do it have their moment when it counts. Like, like Jameis Winston did, or like Charlie Ward did. It's really cool to see that. Or like Phil Kofer is going to do in March.
Damn right. Noles play Troy on Monday night. I'll be there.
All right.
That's right. Fun.
Okay, good.
Quick scouting report on Troy. Troy lost their all-time three-point shooter in Wesley Person Jr. He actually is related to Chuck Person, the rifleman. He's his nephew, and his dad, Wesley Person Sr. Also, Jordan Varnado is a guy that I don't think they have anymore that was a big defensive presence. Should be an easy
They lost him? Did he get hurt? Or he graduated?
Graduated, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, they made the tournament 2 years ago and got blitzed out by Duke in the opening round. Last year they lost in the second or third round of the Sun Belt Conference, but the talent they had from that run in 16 and then what they had last year is all gone. So should bode well for the Noles. Golly, my audio's been coming in really low, which is probably a good thing. You're louder than me, Corey, which is a good thing. Couple final parting shots, Corey. Better job, Georgia Tech or Kansas State with Bill Snyder retiring. It's open now. Manhattan, Kansas, buddy.
Yeah, Georgia Tech. I don't know how Bill Snyder cracked the code other than recruiting a ton of JUCO kids, but it's almost next to impossible to win there, like win big there. Georgia Tech, you're still in a really highly populated part of the world with a lot of good local football talent. Georgia can't take all of them.
Do you know the name of the student paper at the University of Georgia?
Yeah, of course. The red and black.
Did you see the cover on Sunday?
I did. You gonna play us out with that?
Yeah.
It was Everybody Hurts, by the way. If people don't know, there was a rock band in the 80s and 90s called REM. They hailed from Athens, and that was one of their big hits in the 90s. Was this little song called Everybody Hurts?
Just a black front page, and in white, Everybody Hurts. Alabama defeats Georgia 35-28.
I mean, just quit choking. I was thinking I'm so tired of cheering for teams or rooting for teams that get these leads and then having to watch the clock. Like, yeah. I'm just tired. I don't like rooting for teams when you're basically just rooting for the clock to run. That's all you're like looking at the clock. Okay, that's a first down. That'll keep it running. Like, I just hate doing that. It's no fun to watch a football game like that, and it never pans out, ever. Like, when he missed the field goal, I was like, heck, man, he didn't miss one last year, and it didn't matter. Maybe this is what we needed. Maybe this will make Georgia more aggressive, knowing that they don't have a 3-score lead, and they're not just going to run it 3 times in the middle and punt. Nope, that didn't work. But, yeah, like, it's kind of – that's the worst. If it was back and forth like Texas USC in 2005, those games, I just, it's so much more. Like, I bet Auburn fans were doing that in 2013. Like, wow, clock, run, go.
Yeah.
You just keep waiting for the clock, and it just won't go. It won't melt at all. And that's just a really bummer of a way to watch a football game, is to keep, and obviously the Super Bowl, it's like it's happening in slow motion, and the clock won't run ever. I'm just tired of looking at the clock saying, all right, okay, okay, that'll chew another minute and a half up. It doesn't matter. You're going to choke it away. You're going to let the backup quarterback 2 years in a row beat you. By the way, Hurts did make some crazy throws.
He did. How about that?
That's Georgia's luck. He couldn't look like the real Jalen Hurts. He had to be a right-handed Tua.
Last question, because it's been an
Also,
hour.
they fumbled 3 times, Aslan, and they recovered them all.
Yeah.
Including one in the end zone that he held on to for a millisecond.
That was right, though, Corey. I'm sorry. It was right. That was the right call.
He literally had it for a millisecond. No, I'm not. Sure, right. I think I thought, my opinion was, man, when you slow it down to a freeze frame, yeah, he had it. The overhead view looked like he was still wiggling it in his hands a little bit. And either way, the call on the field was he didn't recover it. So that's what bothered me, is that, man, was that really enough to overturn? But I guess if you freeze it down for a millisecond, and he had control of it for a millisecond. But again, that's just bad luck. He fumbled it right back to himself. So did the receiver on the last drive. Anyway, what are you going to do?
If I was like Sport Czar, my first 3 calls to action would be, first, that we're going to go back to calling it Division I and Division I AA. This whole FBS, FCS thing doesn't catch. The round of 64 in men's basketball is going to be the first round. It's not going to be called the round of 64. The first 4 is not the first round. That's the first 4.
Right.
And then I feel like in a touchdown, the person possessing the ball, their body and the ball should both be over the plane. I just find it incredible that you just need to get the ball just a square millimeter of the freaking oblong ball just to break the plane, and it's a touchdown. Like, you got to fight and claw for everything. And then for the touchdown, it's like you can just dive over a pile and then get the ball knocked out of your hand and fumble. But no, it doesn't matter. The ball went over the plane. It's a touchdown. Like, you need to possess the ball inside the rectangle. It'd be a lot more low scoring if that was the case. No, I don't think so, man. I don't think it'd be that.
There's not a lot of rushing touchdowns where the guys end up all the way in the end zone.
Well, how about the entire ball has to be over the plane?
There you go. I'm with that. I'm all about that.
All right.
Yeah, sure. The entire ball has to be over the goal line for it to count, not the tippy tip.
Yeah, no. And I'm only asking this question because you talked about the clock running out. This will be the one that we're going to go out on. Is Alabama-Oklahoma going to be like Georgia-Oklahoma last year? Do you think Oklahoma can hang and then whoever just scores last is going to win? Or do you think it'll just be 47-30 Alabama wins?
Yeah, I just think Georgia had a good defense. So they could slow down Alabama a little bit. Slow down Oklahoma a little bit. Not much, obviously. But I don't think Georgia's defense last year was as good as this Alabama defense, especially up front. And also, man, I'm telling you, I know they gave up 300 yards passing, but Fromm he was never throwing to any open dudes, like receiver-wise. They just could get no separation. He just had to put it on a dime every time. And I don't think Murray will be able to do that consistently with the pressure he's getting. I just don't think he's used to seeing defenses like this. I know we said that about Baker Mayfield too, but you're also giving Nick Saban 3 weeks to prepare. Yeah. And I don't see that. I certainly don't see how Oklahoma can stop Alabama at all as long as Tua is healthy. Yeah. I mean, good grief. Oklahoma can't stop anyone. I can't imagine. Can you imagine Oklahoma if they're scoring less than 50?
Alabama scoring 50 on Oklahoma? Yeah,
I'm saying, if Alabama's trying, can you imagine them scoring less than 50 on Oklahoma?
Yeah, not if Tua's playing. Yeah,
they just scored 35 on Georgia.
Yeah.
So, and Tua didn't play well, and they had to go to Jalen Hurts, and they still scored 35, and they dropped 2 passes that would have been touchdowns, and they still scored 35. I can't imagine them scoring less than 50. And on the flip side, no way in my life can I imagine Oklahoma scoring 50 on Nick Saban. Yeah. I don't see it. So I know people say that we should go to eight playoffs, but golly, the Final Four. Both teams are like 12-point favorites. We really need 4 more of these teams. Like that's the separation.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Alabama and Clemson, man.
True or false? Nick Saban has never lost a game at Alabama by more than 14 points.
I'm trying to think back to Xavier Lee, Dakota Fag. That was just a touchdown. Yeah, I don't know. Is that true?
That's true. So
yeah, man. He needs to kick it on down the road, man. I'm tired of it.
So
it's not fun. Like the whole storyline. I tweeted it out on Saturday night. Like somebody's like, "Can you believe it? Jalen Hurts against the same team. He's the one that comes in. What a magical story! Wow." And I'm like, "Yeah, man. The feel good story of the year. Alabama winning again. Awesome." And now they're going to play a team that has 0 chance to beat them. And I don't think Georgia deserved to get in. I know that's not the criteria, deserve, but in my mind it is. And Georgia didn't deserve to get in. Shouldn't lose to LSU by 20. And you had your chance to play yourself in. You had a 2-touchdown lead in the second half. You let Jalen Hurts beat you. But great, man. It's going to be Alabama and Clemson again. Awesome. It's starting to feel a lot like women's basketball. It's going to be UConn and who? Who's it going to be? UConn, Notre Dame?
Yeah.
It's just golly, man. It's not even fun. I guess this is what people thought of back when Florida State was in the 90s.
No.
Well, good, great. Florida State's in the championship game every year. Like in 98.
Yeah.
When Kansas State lost and UCLA lost to get Florida State, and I'm sure people were like, "Oh, great, man! Florida State's back in the national championship game." That's what I wanted to see. But golly, I'm sick of Alabama.
Yeah.
Sick of them, Aslan.
Yeah. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Why is Florida not playing UCF in a bowl game? We'll talk about that tomorrow. He's Corey. I'm Aslan. Thanks for listening. We'll catch up with you later.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.